So yeah, my name is Jakob Leveille. I studied science and business, co-op with a specialization in biotechnology at University of Waterloo. I graduated in 2024 and I took BET 300, the SLICC course, in my final semester, so my 4B. Currently, I work at a very, very early stage energy startup in the Waterloo region, and I basically do everything that's not writing code. Two biggest motivators for taking the class, BET 300, was first to be able to take a class like with friends. I think that was a huge one because it is our final semester and we wanted to do something together before we all left and sort of moved away. But additionally, a large factor was being interested in entrepreneurship. I think I always was since a kid, but I didn't really activate that energy throughout undergrad. So I wanted to take, I guess, my final semester as like the last chance to be able to do that. So the main focus of our SLICC was kind of finding product market fit with our project, as well as doing some customer validation. I think the main focus of that was because it was based on a capstone. So we already did have a physical prototype. So there wasn't necessarily a huge amount of focus on the actual product. And I think a lot of us for the four of us, two of us were business focused and two of us were engineers. So myself and the other business person really wanted to focus on understanding that sort of aspect of a company. And we took this opportunity because it's so self-directed to be able to do that in a semi-structured manner where we still had sort of a back pedal to fall on, but also be able to just have our product and go with it. I think some of the skills and goals I wanted to take out were a lot of intangibles, which I think makes it really hard to quantify. But I think because we were facing the customers and that was sort of the focus of our project, I think I wanted to be able to better communicate with those customers and figure out how to ask really good questions is the first one, and B, figure out what to do with that information. Because I think if you do not have either of those, doing either of them is kind of useless. I think asking bad questions and then doing good things with that data is not super useful. And even if you're asking good questions but do not know how to interpret or manage that data, it also does not do anything. So I think that main goal was figuring out both sides of that aspect of saying, how do you get good information out of someone? And then what do you actually do with that information to make it valuable? So during this, I think we received a variety of support. We met a lot with our alumni advisors throughout to sort of bounce ideas off. And I think that was super valuable because throughout the course, these alumni advisors came from different backgrounds, different experiences, and different roles. And I think that allowing us to chat with these different people sort of gave us different perspectives that we did not think of previously. As well, we did have lots of meetings with Wayne. We actually ended up bothering him and finding him at his office, which he was not super pleased about. But we just had a bunch of just a huge amount of questions that we wanted to ask, and we didn't want to wait until class. So that as well, as well as I guess industry experience, meeting with these customers was as much for us learning about the product and them, as well as us trying to learn about ourselves and what we wanted to learn throughout that class as well. So a lot of the people that we met with did actually give us advice as well. Throughout the process, the instructor played almost like a sports coach almost, where at the end of the day, the player does decide what to do, but the coach does sort of help draft that and be there if needed and help guide from the sidelines. And I think that was the perfect balance for us in saying we were able to go out because we were familiar with the industry and familiar with what was wanted. And we actually knew the nitty gritty details and we were on the court, but the instructor, I guess Wayne, was able to sort of help us if needed. And we were able to, look at a coach on the sideline and he was able to point us or give us the right directions. I think a big moment for us was we were actually meeting with a customer, or I guess doing a customer interview more of and trying to understand more about the industry. And we met with someone who essentially fully validated our idea. He was essentially like, wow, makes total amount of sense. This is I guess a problem that we've actually faced before and we see a lot. And we have not seen necessarily this approach to the solution. And I think that was really validating, both to say that we were asking the right questions and B, the fact that we were explaining our product well enough that he was able to understand what we were doing and then realize that, oh, this does fit in the market and is needed was huge for us. I think one of the specific challenges we faced was because we were doing a lot of customer interviews, we really had to figure out how to ask good questions. And I think at the beginning, we were not really doing that at all. We were just asking questions almost for the sake of asking questions. And I think we realized after talking to 10 or so people that we have all of these answers, but they're kind of just words put together and they weren't really interlinked or interpretable. And I think that we met with some of our alumni advisors and had a chat with Wayne, and we sort of broke down and say, okay, what do we want? What answers do we want? And then how do we basically phrase those questions to get those answers? So we essentially just ended up working backwards and figuring out how to ask those questions, as well as reading the mom test. That's a really good book about customer validation, sort of figuring out how to ask those questions. For my background that I found in science through my undergrad courses, a lot of it is just straight learning. But I think that the way that the SLICC is approached and the way that you execute it is not necessarily focused on learning, but it's actually about learning how to learn. And I think that's much, much, much more valuable, because I think the more effectively you learn how to learn, the more effectively and quickly you can learn other things. And I think that is a baseline skill that I think is extremely valuable and underrated. And I think that because it's so self-directed and you have to teach yourself and you have to point yourself in your own direction, obviously with sort of a backpedal and people to fall on, but that allows for a sort of creativity and focus that a lot of other courses do not allow. And I think that plays a huge role for sure. I would say absolutely take a SLICC course for sure if you can. I think that it played a huge part in sort of shaping the way that I learn, the way that I learned how to learn, and actually my career choices. And I think that played a huge effect, especially in my final year. I honestly wish I could have taken it earlier, but I think that if someone was considering taking one, I would absolutely say take it. I do not really see a real downside of taking any of them at all, honestly, if you have space for it. I think it's an amazing, it's sort of a refreshing approach to education, especially in post-secondary setting. And I think that that's extremely valuable. And I think giving everyone the chance to do a project that's very, very self-directed is extremely important. I think that there's one of the main points for me. I think that the SLICC really helps you understand your learning approach. And I think that because a lot of, post-secondary education is very linear and very progressive, I think that the SLICC is really interesting because instead of starting off at A, knowing you have to go to Z and figuring out B, C, D, E, and so on, you almost start at A, figure out where you want to go for C, and then figure out B, and then you go to C and you figure out E and then go to D. So it's almost like a staircase instead of just a straight line. And I think that makes that super, super valuable. And that learning is really hard to find anywhere else, especially in a structured course. And I think that that's an extremely valuable thing, and thing that I wish truly more people could experience. I think that taking BET was an extremely determinant pivot point in both my personal and professional life. And I think that I take a lot of those learnings, and whether they're intangibles or sort of tangible, and live with them every day. And I think that that's extremely valuable. And I think that sort of impact would be extremely difficult to find for any other course or any other way of learning other than a SLICC.